Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he raises the Jimmy Lai case and Uyghur rights with President Xi Jinping. He also says talks make progress on trade, travel and resetting UK-China relations. Iran says its armed forces are ready to respond immediately to any U.S. strike. The warning comes as President Trump reiterates military threats and U.S. forces deployed to the region. EU foreign ministers are expected to list Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group. The move follows a deadly crackdown on protests, EU's top diplomat has said. Two U.S. federal agents involved in the fatal shooting of intensive care nurse Alex Pretty during an immigration operation in Minneapolis have been placed on administrative leave. DHS says the move follows national outrage over the death and comes as protests and scrutiny of federal enforcements continue. Israel's parliament gives initial approval to the 2026 state budget. Averting an immediate early election, the spending plan still faces a tough final vote amid coalition divisions. Dozens are killed after RSF drones hit the town of Dilling in South Kordofan, local media's report. The strikes target military positions in a central market. China executes 11 people linked to Myanmar-based scam gangs. State media has reported Beijing says the move targets key figures in cross-border cybercrime. A plane crash in northeast Colombia kills all 15 people on board, including a local lawmaker. The aircraft loses contact minutes after departing Cucuta for a short flight in Ocana. Now we start with Russia-Ukraine. The Kremlin has stated that there is still room for negotiations in the standoff between Iran and the U.S., despite U.S. President Donald Trump's threat of military strikes on Iran. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has emphasized that using force would create chaos and lead to dangerous consequences in the region. The Kremlin is calling for restraint from all sides, urging a diplomatic solution to prevent further escalation. Meanwhile, France has thrown its support behind efforts to include Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the European Union's list of terrorist organizations. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has confirmed that France will back the move, citing the IRGC's violent crackdown on protests that has left thousands of people dead. France, along with Italy and Germany, is pushing for sanctions against those responsible for the violence, signaling a strong European stance against Iran's actions. Let's listen in.
La France a annoncé hier qu'elle soutiendra l'inscription du corps des gardiens de la Révolution sur la liste des organisations terroristes de l'Union européenne, parce qu'il ne peut y avoir aucune impunité pour les crimes commis. Le courage inouï des Iraniennes, des Iraniens qui ont été la cible de ces violences ne peut rester vain. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous prendrons aujourd'hui des sanctions européennes à l'encontre des responsables de cette répression. Membres du gouvernement, procureurs, chefs d'unité de police, membres du corps des gardiens de la Révolution, responsables du blocage d'Internet, plus de 20 individus et entités verront leurs actifs gelés et se verront interdit l'accès au territoire européen.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Ben Aris. He's a former Moscow bureau chief of the Daily Telegraph, joins us live from Berlin. Thank you very much, Mr. Aris, for joining us. Good to see you. Now thank you. Now looking at first Iran and U.S., although U.S. states that, the diplomacy is open, they have been, it seems like they're piling up their military readiness in the region. So where exactly do you think diplomacy is open? And when they say diplomacy is open, what are they suggesting?
Well, diplomacy is fading away, isn't it? I mean, it used to be a rules-based international order, and now we have military assets being moved around. I mean, an armada of US naval vessels is in the Gulf now, pointing a gun at Iran, and they call this diplomacy. It's a threat, military force. Either you do negotiations, which is what they understand as diplomacy, or we bomb you. And this is happening, again and again. And the same with the diplomacy that went into Trump's quote-unquote discussion with Venezuela before Christmas, which ended up with a special military operation where they decapitated the country by kidnapping the president. And with this destruction of the international order, the rules have basically disappeared. It used to be sovereign nations, the integrity of another country was inviolable under the UN Charter, and now that counts for nothing. So the diplomacy that's actually going on, I think, is going on in the rest of the world, where the emerging markets, the global south, if you prefer, is actively building relationships, security deals, but economic deals as well, and diversifying away from Trump. And this is real diplomacy, and it's new as well, because it used to be under the auspices of the international organizations such as the IMF, the World Bank, things like that. But those Western institutions now also count for nothing. And so what's being done is real diplomacy is being done in the emerging world, in the growing world, on the basis of traditional diplomacy, where you talk about your national interests, what do you have in common, how can you help each other, and then you slot it into a broader framework of regional, multicultural, multi-country relationships. And that process is going on, and is going on excluding the West, specifically to protect ourselves from the West. And by the West, I think we mean, quote unquote, America.
Thank you for highlighting that. And now looking at France's, stance towards Iranian security forces, I think. Why do you think France has decided to make such moves, and why is France in particular eyeing or putting focus onto Iran and onto Iran's security guards?
Well, this is the irony here, is Europe in particular still believes in the international order. I mean, the whole European Union was built on the idea of shared values and bringing together multiple countries. Because previous to the Second World War, Europe had a nasty habit of going to war with each other continuously in very bloody and long wars. And the European Union project was supposed to end that, and that was an enormous success. And so Europe really does believe in these values, because it managed to bring together what is the biggest market in the world, some 400 million people in very different cultures, different countries, and make them function together extremely successfully. And so they don't want to give up on the rules-based order. But the world has changed, and the rules-based order doesn't work anymore. So still stick to the old principles, and they still talk about sovereignty and all the old ways of seeing these things. And so Iran is in chaos. You have a democracy, an authoritarian regime. If you like, the people are very unhappy. They want change, and they're not getting it. And in Tehran, the authorities have just been mowing people down with machine guns. The estimates are vague, but something on the order of 20,000 people have been shot. That's tenfold what the previous killings have been. And Europe can't stand by and not condemn that, because it runs against everything that they believe in. But at the same time, they're powerless now, because the international order used to be backed by things like UN, and the UN could have a mandate to attack or send peacekeepers or close the sky, as it did, for example, in Libya, which went wrong. And they can't even do that. So they're helpless, and all they can do is make these statements. But as I say, they're a testament for a world, I think, that no longer exists.
Right. And lastly, as you highlight rule-based diplomacy, rule-based order is losing its power or its influence now. How is this return of great power competition reshaping democracy?
Well, we go back to the 19th century. It's like who has the biggest army is in charge, and Trump has shown it that you argue with people. With Europe, the argument has been over tariffs and economics, and he's not able to use military force against Europe. But then look at Greenland. There's an example of an argument, he wants the resources, the minerals in Greenland, and there he is willing to use military force against the EU. And so, as I say, we're in a ruleless world anymore. And what do you do as a European Union? I mean, the Danes started sending troops to protect Greenland, and the idea of a US soldier killing a Danish soldier, then the whole NATO security organization or arrangements just falls to pieces immediately, which nobody wanted to do. And Europe is also in a position where it's been relying on American security since the Second World War, and suddenly Article 5, the NATO collective security agreement, doesn't count, or at least no one has any confidence in it. I mean, what happens if Russia marches into the Baltics? The Baltics were saying yesterday that they believe that Russia's going to come and invade them. And nominally they're a NATO country, nominally they're covered by Article 5, nominally as soon as the Russians cross the border, then that triggers NATO reaction, Europe will come to its military aid, and so would the States. And it's that last bit, no one has any confidence that that would happen. And then you'd end up with a direct clash between Europe and Russia. And currently the state of the European defenses is such that Russia would actually win that war and need America's help. And there's no guarantee that Trump would come to Europe's aid.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Aris, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, staying in Kremlin, the Kremlin has strongly condemned the sanctions on Lukoil, calling them illegal and unacceptable. It has emphasized that the interests of Lukoil must be respected in any dealings. However, the Kremlin has refrained from commenting on Carlyle Group's agreement to purchase most of Lukoil's foreign assets. This deal is valued at around $22 billion, and it includes Lukoil's key operations across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Mexico. The sale comes under pressure from U.S. sanctions, which have been in place since February 2022. While the deal progresses, the final approval still depends on reviews by the U.S. Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control and other regulatory bodies involved in sanction enforcement. In other developments, the Kremlin is also awaiting a response from the U.S. on President Putin's offer to extend limits in the expiring nuclear treaty. It has warned that its expiry could create a significant gap in the global legal framework. The Kremlin has also offered no comments on reports of a potential ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine regarding energy infrastructure. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Ben Aris. He's joining us live from Berlin. Thank you very much, Mr. Aris, for staying with us. Now, looking at the Kremlin strongly condemns these sanctions on Lukoil. Why and what more can you tell us about this situation with Lukoil?
So the oil sanctions are a complicated topic. The headline is that, firstly, Trump has put no sanctions on Russia at all for his entire first year, except these ones. And they should be seen in the context of the negotiations in order to bring the war in Ukraine to an end, something Trump was very keen to do, something he said he'd do in 24 hours after taking office, which of course didn't happen. And the imposition of these sanctions was Trump's attempt to actually put some real tough pressure on the Putin in order to make him come to the negotiating table and do a deal, which actually seems to have been successful in so much as in December we now have a 27-point plan that's more or less agreed between the US and Russia. Lukoil in particular, why these were so effective or hurtful as sanctions, that Lukoil together with Rosneft are Russia's two biggest oil companies, and together they account for about a third of the exports. So sanctioning Lukoil on paper is very painful. In practice, the oil sanctions have completely failed because all that happened was that Lukoil's exports have sunk by 1 million barrels, and then the other state-owned companies which aren't under sanctions, suddenly their exports jumped by 1 million barrels a day. So as far as Russia's concerned and the budget, the oil sanctions make no difference. For Lukoil in particular, it's extremely damaging. And again, the sanctions on Lukoil have actually been watered down and delayed well into February. They're not in effect, but the effect on the company of the proposed sanctions has been enough to try to force it to try and basically sell all its international assets. And it has oil fields and interests all over the world, in Kazakhstan and the Middle East, and it needs to dump these. But as a sanctioned entity, doing that deal is extremely difficult. So the Kremlin is very annoyed because what you've done, in effect, is destroy one of Russia's best, and this is a privately owned company, it's extremely well run, and you've destroyed one of Russia's very best, very profitable companies, and force it into a position where it's going to have to sell all of these extremely valuable assets worth billions and billions of dollars at knockdown prices. So of course they're objecting. But as I say, in the grand scheme of things, the political goal, which has been sanction Russia, force it to end the war, take away its income, all of that didn't work.
Yes, right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Ben Aris for joining us from Berlin and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we stay in Europe. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen has said that talks between Denmark, Greenland and the United States over Arctic territory have gone well with constructive atmosphere. Although no final decisions have been made, Rasmussen has expressed cautious optimism ahead of his meeting with EU colleagues in Brussels. These diplomatic discussions come after months of tensions between Denmark and the US over President Donald Trump's repeated demands to take over Greenland despite the standoff. Rasmussen says he's slightly more hopeful than a week ago. Let's listen in.
I just want to confirm what State Secretary Rubio said yesterday, that we have had the very first meeting at senior official level in Washington yesterday regarding the Greenlandic issue. It went well in a very constructive atmosphere and tone, and new meetings are planned. It's not that things are solved, but it's good because now we are back to what we agreed in Washington exactly 2 weeks and a day ago. After that, there was a major detour. Things were escalating, but now we are back on track. And as I have stated on many occasions, we of course share the U.S. security concerns regarding the Atlantic. This is something we want to solve in close cooperation in NATO, but also in a trilateral dialogue between Denmark, Greenland, the Kingdom of Denmark and U.S. So it's not that we can conclude anything, but I'm slightly more optimistic today than a week ago.
Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from Jaipur. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you, Asum. Good evening.
Good evening. Now looking at the Danish side, Danish foreign minister, he seems to be giving benefit of the doubt to US. Do you think that it's the right move from the Danish side, and can it really trust US again?
Oh, no. Simple answer is no. Once bitten, twice shy. So when I say once bitten, twice shy, once bitten by a snake, even a thread should look like a snake. So I think it is too premature. I am nobody to comment on such a senior leadership of Denmark, but going by pragmatic assessment and the experience I have had in life, one should be extremely careful and be very, very cautious in dealing with USA. Not to say that USA is not capable, it is a superpower, it is got everything in it except for trust. Trust is the biggest victim in the world. So hence, to respond to your question, I would say that Denmark has to exercise caution and be very careful while dealing with such kind of stakeholders, be it anybody, be it America or any other country.
So building on that, Major General, so what else can Denmark realistically do other than being, or giving the benefit of the doubt here to US?
Buy time, simply buy time. Best thing in life and the universe is that when a deep wound or scar has been inflicted on us, it is just have strategic patience, apply the cure, that is the ointment. Ointment is the time, antiseptic ointment. And I'm sure nothing is permanent in life, nor in society, nor in geopolitics. Everything is bound to change. So give time a chance, and look for the best, and be prepared for the worst. That is what, because Denmark and the European countries, they have been caught napping. They never expected this to happen, and it did happen. So should it happen in future, what should be their response? Should they prepare their defenses to stand up and counter US effectively, or they should let it go, give it a pass? I think the answer is well known to each and every one of the European. And my little submission, humble submission, is that it is good to talk optimistically and bring in optimism as an outcome. But I think there is an old saying: prepare and prevent, repair and repent. Back to you.
And Major General, you say that buying time is the key here. But what if it gets worse? As you also mentioned, how they should be preparing for the worst. What does their capacity, Denmark's capacity, look like? Greenland's capacity look like? How long will it take for them to prepare for the worst?
You see, no country in the world can ever prepare to prevent any kind of a conflict against the mightiest and the superpower of the world. So therefore, the only answer lies in collaborating with like-minded countries, building up a network of collaboration, support, and agreement and alliances, and keep building up keep diverting your fund allocation, your budget allocation towards defense preparedness, and start applying. Let them create a think tank within the country. What should they do? Let them apply themselves. They must have option A, option B, option C, and when it comes to push comes to shove, well, they must have some counter strategy placed. It could be near the belly of the USA, it could be the backyard of USA, it could be the heartland of USA. So those kind of things have to be thought of for survival. Like yesterday, Kallis, the foreign relations leader, the minister of European Council, made a very good statement that it's about time they have to take some steps for survival. You cannot actually outsource your safety and security or survival to some other country. If you have to survive, that's a powerful statement. So that itself suggests and indicates that Denmark has to first and foremost divide the entire course of action into short-term, medium-term, long-term, at multiple levels: strategic, that is the global level; regional level; and local, that is the national level. And when they identify, they have to look at the aspects of diplomacy, the information, they have to look at the military might, they have to look at the economy, to the technology. Denmark enjoys lots of supremacy in their technological advancement. If we go into it, it is not only the renewable energy. They have got lots of things in which they can create leverage. So they need to actually have a matrix of leverages which can be applied effectively in short, medium, and long term at global, regional, and national level. That will give them possibly some solution to protect them in future, as also go in for a kind of a coalition and alliances in order to build up their national military might. That would actually give them some effective and meaningful answer. Back to you, Asuma.
Thank you for sharing that deep insight with us, Major General. Thank you. Now moving on to China. China's defense ministry has confirmed that a probe into 2 former high-ranking Chinese generals is a major achievement. The investigation focuses on Zhang Yuxia, the second-in-command under President Xi Jinping as vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, who has long been considered Xi's closest military ally. Alongside Zhang, Liu Zhenli, the chief of staff of the CMC's Joint Staff Department, is also under investigation for suspected serious violations of discipline and law. The Defense Ministry has emphasized that despite these probes, China continues to engage in talks with the militaries from around the world. Let's listen in.
我们坚决反对对中方有关反腐行动的污蔑抹黑。中国军队在党的坚强领导下，始终秉持开放合作理念，将继续与各国军队开展对话交流，深化军事互信， 加强务实合作，为国际和地区和平稳定贡献中国力量。坚决查处张又侠、刘振立是党和军队反腐败斗争取得的重大成果，是党和军队有决心、有力量的重要体现，对于打赢军队反腐败斗争攻坚战、持久战、总体战具有重要意义。
Now for this, we welcome back retired Major General Siddhakarji. He's joining us from Jaipur. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Now, what are we to make of these, high-ranking officials being taken away, and the Chinese military saying that this is this is for suspected serious violation of discipline and a law?
I personally feel that the current situation, firstly, what has happened? You see, out of 7 members in the Politburo, less for Z, rest all have been purged. There is no one else. The vice chairman himself is the topmost, I would say, highest official who is to enjoy the loyalty, the blessings of Z so far in almost everything. And he has been purged on account of disloyalty, kind of espionage, leaking information on nuclear security to USA, and not reining in the people in the PLA who have been found lacking discipline, etc., etc. So with him gone, now there is a vacuum. Now, selecting people for the Politburo is a long-drawn process. It takes lots of time, deep investigation, scrutiny, goes into the personality profile, and based on the experience of multiple stakeholders, all 7 of them, they are selected. Thereafter, Z has to actually scrutinize himself. He has to satisfy. So this is a long-drawn process. It's going to take a lot of time. Now, going by the timelines and the agenda which China has, China on its own had already made up the mind that by 2027, they would be reunifying Taiwan. So first thing that comes to my mind is, will it be possible under the circumstances with lack of experience? The vice chairman, the Zhao, who has been ousted or purged, he is the only person in China or PLA who has had some experience of conflict a long time back in 1979 against Vietnam. Barring him, there is nobody else. So in absence of any kind of experience in any conflict or war or battle, they will be lacking. This will become highly acute and unprecedented. Second thing is, experience in warfare actually matters a lot. You need to have guides, philosophers, friends to do mentoring, to channelize, formulate correct policies in the country. China's modernization of armed forces started in the year 2015. They have lots of flip-flops, lots of pitfalls, and recently they have introduced 2 different wings or arms. One is the space, the other is the cyber. Now, both the things, they require lots of deft handling. Is Z capable to handle these things directly? I doubt if he is possible. Therefore, it brings me to the point that not only the vacuum will continue to remain as a vacuum, but it will result in a telling impact on the structure, on the design, on the outcome of preparation of People's Liberation Army as also plan and PLAF, which consequently will impact on the high-end objective of reunification Taiwan, as also maintaining law and order and solidarity and discipline amongst the PLA, because there is a inner revolution, discontentment which is rising within PLA and within China, which is the most dangerous threat to the existence of Z.
With that, I would like to thank retired Major General Siddhakarji for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you. Now, moving on to tech news, the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has opened an investigation after a Waymo self-driving vehicle struck a child near a school in Santa Monica. California last week. The incident occurred on January 23rd when the child ran across the street from behind a double-parked SUV and the Waymo vehicle was unable to avoid the contact. The child sustained minor injuries but quickly stood up and walked to the sidewalk. Waymo has stated that its vehicle detected the child and braked hard, reducing speed from 17 mph to under 6 mph before the collision. Authorities are investigating whether the Waymo vehicle exercised proper caution given the proximity to the school during drop-off hours with children and other pedestrians in the area. The agency is also looking into the vehicle's behavior in school zones, especially during high traffic times. Meanwhile, Waymo has said it will cooperate fully with the investigation. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.